Hello and welcome to the Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast series powered by openbusinesscouncil.org, citiesabc.com, and our platform as well, fashionabc.org. In our series, we've been profiling the people that are changing the world, the authors, the writers, and especially, I would say, the people that have curiosity enough to not be in one train of thought, but trying always to look at new solutions. And I think one of the things is I want to start with a quote from James Cameron that right now is actually very into fashion because of the avatars, but as well is interesting the quote, and I've been thinking about that actually these days. If you set your goals ridiculous high and it's failure, you will fail above everyone else's success. So I think probably this is a quote for everyone listening to this podcast, because everyone that is actually profiled in this podcast are people that actually have ridiculous quoting the quote ridiculous high goals, and you can only do that to write books and to do different areas, create a career. And that's what we're trying to do here. And of course, my guest of this episode is precisely an author, philanthropist, and international South Africa conference speaker. So I'm talking about Michael Stickler. And he is a conference speaker, specialized in business, finance, thought leadership, and Christian leadership. And he has been creating as well as the publisher of leadership books, which is one of the things that I'm quite excited as well here, because he's been fantastically publishing amazing books. And please go to the website of leadershipbooks.com, where you find some of the most impressive authors you can find in the world, but as well fantastic personalities and leaders and different other personalities that are important for our days and for our different areas. So the leadership books, which Michael created in 1999 and get published, which helps aspiring authors turn their ideas into a book format and provide additional assistance to design the cover and the interior and create targeted and integrated marketing campaigns for authors. So Michael is a graduate from the California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo. His first book went from being unsellable, according to the publishers, and I think this is a trend in most of the authors, to selling more than 300,000 copies using a new publishing methodology that he created himself. His best-selling book, A Journey to Generosity, is widely acclaimed through the Christian community, and as a prolific author, Michael Stickler has won recognition for his work, including Clive Bundy, American Terrorist Patriot, Journey to Generosity, and Life Without Reservation. So some of the books. It's worth noting that some of these most high-profile books and acclaimed books includes The Journey to Generosity, which I mentioned, from 2013, which is a devotional book that deepens in faith of a reader in 41 days, installing an awakening change and them. And in terms of the business leadership literature, he has written several books, including Continued Success in 2015. And here Michael provides time-test strategies, techniques, and expertise from the most extreme minds in the faith-based non-profit world to avoid planning pitfalls and develop a false safe budget, and a lot of areas how to work on these segments. So there's a lot of things in terms of his work, but I would say that he's a global expert in leadership and books. And as well, he has a lot of areas of his career that we're going to be talking today. So welcome to our series, Michael.
Thank you so much, Dinis, for having me. I'm really, I'm just greatly appreciated that you would honor me with, let me talk to your viewers.
So no, it's a pleasure, and honor is all mine. So let's look at your career and education. So because you have really this kind of force of nature impact, but as well a very generosity, which is one of the areas. And I think it's something that I'm trying to learn more. And I think everyone listening to us should learn, because if you are generous, it actually comes back to you. But it's not an easy thing. And as well, it starts by ourselves. So a bit of your background, how did you become the person you are today, and what made some of the pieces in the journey?
Well, what's funny about me is I studied agriculture in college, California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo. And by the way, thank you for pronouncing that correctly. Most people don't. It's primarily, especially in the 80s, it was a primarily an agriculture college and architectural and engineering school. It's funny, people, I meet people now and they say, "Oh, you graduated from Cal Poly," and I'm like, they say it with awe, like I went to Harvard or Yale or something, and I just laugh, and I guess their reputation got better than when I went there, because when I went there it was a pretty average school. But I studied agriculture, and it's funny, if you talk to my college friends, they would all laugh and say, "I can't believe Mike writes books," because I was a reluctant writer. One of the upsides to me of ag school is that I could avoid the humanities. I didn't have to do very much English. I didn't have to do humanities courses. Literature was not a requirement, all of those things, because they were not an interest to me. What was an interest to me was science and biology and zoology and those kinds of things. And so here I am. I started writing books in 2000. I started publishing books in 2013. And the reason I got here is I started writing books in 2000 because in my career path at the time, which was in business and nonprofit work, people kept saying to me, "You need to write a book about this. This would really expand your base and whatnot." And so I was really reluctant. I didn't like writing. I would sit at the keyboard and struggle with sentence structure, and I would struggle with trying to tell an overarching story, and it was just difficult for me. And the fact is that even today, I don't know how to type. I still type at about 30 words a minute with 2 fingers. And so it was all a very difficult process. And then in 2013, when I published my book, Journey to Generosity, prior to that, I had brought a coach on, a guy who was coaching me through how to write and how to be a book author. And his name was Art Ritter. He co-founded Leadership Books with me. And Art, the first thing Art told me is, "Mike, being a book author is a team sport. It's not an individual sport. So you have multiple players. You've got a general editor, you've got a line editor, you've got a cold reader or proofreader, you've got a publisher, you've got a marketing expert, you've got distribution. You have all of these things. You have one job, Mike, and that job is to be the storyteller." Well, I was a pretty good storyteller by that point. I had a pretty good speaking career and whatnot. And so I embraced that idea, and I just focused on telling great stories and not worrying about the sentence structure and all that, and letting others do that. And that book was my first bestseller, selling it's well over 300,000 copies now, and it grows every day. I still sell that book every day. And so just understanding that, and honestly, I just kind of bloomed into being a writer after that. Once I really kind of got a hold of it. And by the way, that book, Journey to Generosity, was my 15th book. I've written 14 other books, and they were awful. Okay, I looked at them and I'm like, I'm not proud of them, honestly. But the truth is because I was so reluctant, it came through. And so once that book came out, the next one, which was Clive and Bundy, American Patriot, and then the one after that, which is Life Without Reservation, and then my last book, which is my first fiction work, Ghost Patriot, they've all been best-selling books. And all of them selling over 200,000 or more copies. And it's just been a great ride. If you and I met on the airplane, I wouldn't tell you, Dinis, I was a book publisher. I would tell you I was an author. And the reason why is because I identify myself as an author. I see myself as an author. I will write books as long as God gives me strength in my fingers to hit the keyboard. I will write books until I can't do it anymore. I may not be a publisher forever, but I definitely will be an author for the rest of my life. And so I went from reluctant to just very passionate about it. And so now I travel around the world just teaching people and talking to people about, and hopefully inspiring people to be an author and to get their book published, and to see what the world would say about your ideas.
Fascinating, and really, I love your honesty and as well humility on that, because it's really writing book is not an easy task, and as a writer I speak for myself, but it's about passion. It's a passion task, and if you love it, it becomes part of your life. In my case, it was always a passion since I was a child. So you had a slightly different experience. So from this experience, so from writing 14 books until you got a bestseller, tell us a bit about that persistence, because it's a passion. Like you said, you see yourself as an author, but a bit of that trajectory when you did your first book and when you actually kept doing, even if it didn't work. Because I think a lot of people, first of all, people listening to us, I think there's a common say that people in life have to write a book, have a child, and plant a tree, or have a child probably first, write a book second, and have a tree third. But when it comes to reality, is that a lot of people really don't try, and they're not persistent enough. So what made that persistent on you, and as well that generosity of persistent, but as well of then working with a lot of authors besides yourself?
That's an excellent question. So if you go and look at my first 15 books, they were subject oriented. They were focused around what I was doing a lot of speaking and consulting on at the time. And so they seemed like a natural flow of outpouring of content from my speaking, consulting, workshops, that I developed all this material, so I might as well just, put it in a book form. And writing a reading book, a book like that, is not, that could be informational, but I try to tell people, that's a textbook more than it is a piece of literature or a fun consumer book that you want to read. It doesn't take the reader on a journey. It just tries to transfer information. And those can be purposeful and they can be helpful, but they really don't sell books and they don't build an audience. People will buy the book because they think it's necessary for the need that they perceive that they have to try to fulfill. What I learned in my first sessions with my coach was, here's a number for most people that don't know: 57% of all people who buy a book set it down and never finish it. Some say to me, well, that's surprising. I would think it was higher. Well, it might be, but that's generally the statistic that most of us understand. So why do people put books down? Well, I blame it on the author. I do. I blame it on the author. You, as the author, didn't hook that reader at the beginning, hold their interest all the way through the book to the last page, where they couldn't wait to get to the end, because you didn't keep them engaged. You didn't pour your guts down. You were being reserved in what you were saying. You weren't being passionate. You weren't being fearful. None of those things were coming through. You were just trying to transfer data on a piece of paper. And that bores the sin out of people. What you need is to engage them in such a way. And if you can't do it, if you don't know how to do it, you got to get help to learn how to do it. That's what I did, is to really get help at being a great storyteller. And if you can be a great storyteller, then you'll engage people. Don't worry about all the other stuff, trying to build a great storyline and building. Start with just telling stories. And if you have a good editor, they're going to help you with all the other pieces. That's the transfer that I did. And why I kept doing it, to answer your question, is because it just seemed like a natural fit. Well, I'll write a book now that I produce this content. Then I'll produce this content. Now I'll write a book. And it was passionless, honestly. You mentioned in my book, Continued Success. It's got a lot of great information in it, don't get me wrong, but it's a root canal without anesthesia trying to get through it. That's my book. I readily admit it. Why? Because it just doesn't have the passion and the things that it takes to engage a reader.
So you touched about coaching, and I believe that in order to be a great author, a great leader, you have to be coach and you have to continuously learn. And the mentorship, the coaching, of course, there's coaching and mentorship. We can go through that, the concepts of that, but the coaching is quite an important thing. So do you want to highlight, you mentioned the coaching was quite important for you, but as well as someone that is a successful author, but as well someone that is part of the industry, and as well right now as the publisher, I'm sure you're the coach of all the people you publish in one way or the other. But how do you see coaching and that part that impact your life? Because I think it's one thing, especially for young people listening to us, everyone think they can succeed on their own, and they forgot the importance of coaches, mentors, and this continuous work.
Yeah, for me, the point was once I realized my role on the team as a storyteller, I was able to shed off all the other responsibilities which were tying me down, okay, that were holding me down. And once I could shed that off and I embraced it, people ask me all the time, well, what do you do about writer's block? I've never had writer's block, not one time in my life, because I love what I do. I'm passionate about what I do. Now I'm smart enough to realize with schedule and life circumstances and things like that, that I don't try to write when things are rough. Like when my late wife got cancer and went through 11 months of going through cancer and dying. I didn't try to write during that time because it was an all too consuming event in my life. But as soon as the memorial was over, I went to Mexico and wrote Ghost Patriot on the beach, because it was time to write again. So I say that to say, once I shed that off, now for young people, they got to understand it's true. You can learn how to write all by yourself, right? You can hunt the internet and get advice and guidance and whatnot. You can also go to the gym and figure out eventually over time how to get yourself into shape and how to eat right and how to stay healthy. Or in both cases, you could get a coach who will actually streamline that process and get you there quicker. That's the key to a coach or a mentor. Is they know, they've been down this path. They know what obstacles are in the way. They know the difficulties, if you get a good one anyway, and they're going to be able to streamline that path for you to get you there. And that's what coach did for me. My coach, Art Ritter, he did two things for me. He helped me shed that unnecessary responsibility that I didn't really have from myself. And then secondly, helped me have a direct and straight path. And he's a brilliant guy. And you mentioned at the beginning of this, I'm kind of a force of nature on my own. I know that. And he was a guy that was able to put up with all of that and help keep me directed over the years. Now we're best of friends now, and even just in a call just recently, he set us all straight just recently on another book, on another author's book about something that needed to be corrected. The guy is just brilliant. So look for a brilliant coach that's going to help you. That's my advice.
So I want to touch a bit more on the coaching. So when you look to a coach, because I think this is a very important thing, and I think it's one area that actually it's probably the first time I'm speaking this on this channel, and I really appreciate, because of course something from you, it's really very important. Is let's look at the definition of coaching, because in the end of the day, an author is a coach that reflects about the specific area and puts his ideas there. Of course, I'm poetic right now, but in the sense of this kind of looking for a coach, what would be and actually all your books, especially that you publish in your publishing house, are actually, I would say, they have a strong component of coaching and a strong component of business leadership and so forth. So before you go to that, how define this quest for a coach, and especially the relationship, because I think people listen to us, and I speak about this even in my team. As a leader myself, I struggle every day to find the best culture, the best language, the way to inspire people. And I think this is and actually as a father, as a husband, and I'm sorry for your loss with your wife. And I think this everyone has normally bigger problems that normally we have if you look at the different life of every person. But it's about the way you deal with that and the way you move forward. So I would like to hear from your side how you dealt with that, because I think it's really, really important for people listening to us.
So I want to speak when I say picking a coach or selecting a coach. I want to be specific about someone that's going to help you in your writing. You can apply some of these principles in other areas of business and finance and management and those kinds of things. But the key to finding a good coach is, first, not one who is going to just sit and criticize you and tell you what you did wrong. No one wants to sit in that kind of environment. And believe it or not, there's a lot of coaches who are basically just Monday morning quarterbacks who sit in the background and then criticize everything that you just did, opposed to encouraging you in the things that you do well. I mentioned that I was in agriculture, okay, and I was specifically in horses and horse training. I still do it. And one of the very first principles they teach you when communicating with a horse is make the wrong thing difficult and make the right thing easy. When you're trying to train a horse, you make the wrong thing difficult and the right thing easy. Well, believe it or not, a good coach is going to apply that to you. They're going to show you how the wrong thing is not for you, and you'll feel the difficulty in doing it. As I mentioned in my own journey, realizing that I struggled with sentence structure, I struggled with the overall story arc, I struggled with all that. That was difficult for me because it was the wrong thing for me to be doing. The right thing for me to be doing, okay, the right thing made easy, was storytelling, okay? And I see authors do this all the time. They bog down in things that they shouldn't be bogged down in, all right? Because it's not natural to them. It isn't who they are as a core human being. And so they struggle with it. And then it ends up not being a labor of love and passion and fun, but it ends up being a labor of misery and drudgery, and that all comes out in it magnifies itself in the book. Okay, it magnifies itself in the teaching. And so when you're looking for a coach, you gotta have somebody that's going to really help you identify who you are as an individual, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and then help you excel in your strengths, excel in those areas, and make the difficult things be put away. We as human beings have a tendency to always want to do what we like to do. Some of it is taught, so it becomes easy. We like to do it because we know how to do it. And then others is we're passionate about it. Stick with the passionate stuff. And your coach helps you identify that and helps you excel in that. And the only difference I would say is in book authorship is that if you're not passionate about it, it comes out on the page, you're not passionate. But in other areas, in business management, those kinds of things, you start finding yourself avoiding or putting aside things that you don't like to do because it's not really what you should be doing anyway. And that's what a coach helps you identify. We get so wrapped up in all of this in our lives. Same thing with our children. Same thing with our spouse. You know, I look at. By the way, I've been remarried since then, so thank you for your kind words. Life is going really great right now, as you can imagine. I've been remarried, and as I'm learning with my new wife, there's just some things she's just not wired to do. So don't try to ask her to do those things. She's just not wired to do it. Don't try to ask her to it. All that's going to do is cause conflict. Either figure out a way to do it yourself, or figure out a way to get someone else to do it. But don't try to ask her to do it because she's not wired to do it. And it makes a happy home, I got to tell you, because you're just flowing in where everybody's strengths are. Does that help?
No. It's thank you, very inspiring, and I think I like that point of let it go and actually don't try it. I think that's a very good stuff I have to take and own up myself. So let's go through your experience. Especially, let's say you start publishing books and you're still publishing, and there's that passion as an author. So let's look at some of the highlights. So you mentioned a couple of books that are very important for you, and now you are as well doing fiction. I don't know if you want to highlight, because there's 14, 16, a couple of books that you have that you can go through them. So I mentioned a couple of them, and we're going to put as well your bio and information about you for people listening to us. But from your side would be let's say, one of the things I always love to ask is, okay, what is the heritage, or what do you think you want to leave for people listening to us about the author Michael, and the things that really matter for you in terms of your narrative, in terms of your storytelling?
Well, I think that first and foremost is if you're going to be an author, and I think as a public speaker as well, both roles are very similar. One is just long form, the other is short form. Speaking is short form, writing is long form. I think what's really important is that you be an observer of people. And I mean that with all my heart. I was skiing recently. I live in the Sierra Nevada mountains here in Nevada, and I was up in the mountain skiing, and a couple of guys sat down with me for lunch. People I didn't know. They're just sharing the table with me, and they asked me, as an author, what's the most important thing? And I stopped and I paused, and I realized for almost 30 minutes before I met these other men, I was just watching people. I was watching how they scratch their nose and how they scold their kids and how they laugh with their spouse and how they sit down exhausted from spinning skiing and how they interacted with the wait staff. And I just sat and watched people. And why that's important is, first off, you got to watch people with love in your heart, not with judgment, and just take some acknowledge both who you are and who they are, and then recognize the way they behave, because you're going to need that information to carry into a book. So how did they scratch their nose? How did they comb their hair? How did they laugh? How did they chastise their child? How did they, all of those things, those, it's all, to me, is all fodder. It's all great information to pull into your book. So sitting and observing people, noticing, maybe it's not your style, but you know, one of the things that here in Northern Nevada, there's a lot of young people that have dreadlocks. You know, that is certainly not my style. I wouldn't wear my hair in dreads, but I do notice. I noticed as I watch them that they weave things into their hair, like little trinkets and ribbon and stuff like that. I notice how they dress, and I'm going to use that as a character. Okay, again, generations, the newest generation, everybody's got a tattoo. I'm from the generation. I don't have a tattoo on my body, not one piece of ink on my body. I don't judge it, don't understand it, don't judge it. But on the other hand, it's a great way to bring that kind of character. You know, the way people tattoo their body says a lot about what they think and who they are, and what they believe, and all of that is very great fodder for character development and how to engage people. If people don't see themselves in your book, you fail. They need to see themselves in there. Even if it's not something they would ever do, they still need to see themselves in the book. And that's what I'm trying to do. And you can only do that by observing people. People had asked me, have you written lately? And I said, well, kind of. I went down to the park and sat there and on a warm summer day, and I sipped on some water and I just watched people go by, because that's kind of writing, you know. And another thing is to, especially in our multicultural world that we live in, is really trying to understand different people from different parts of the world and understand, you know, their accents and how they see things and what they do, and then share a little bit about your world, you know, to get a sense of how you live. Those are all key things to make a great story. And in that, if you're writing a nonfiction book, you can weave all the stuff that you're trying to get across, the information, the great ideas that you have, your thought leadership, your business leadership. You can weave all that in there and teach people while telling a story. And that's going to be a book that people will read and proclaim. I like to point out the #1 best-selling book, business book in the world, is Patrick Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And most people don't read the subtitle, but it's a business fable. That's the subtitle. It's a business fable. Why is it a business fable? Because he wrote a fiction story about everything he knows about teams. And that's
very inspiring.
piece.
No, fantastic. And I think I love, well, you just said actually a storytelling in the end of the day. And that's what you said with your story of sitting in Nevada in a ski resort and listening to people and analyzing people. That's storytelling, and that's a great author. So thank you for sharing that. And it's a great masterclass in author and actually fiction and writing. And that's what is a writer, is actually someone that can actually captivate our imagination and get into a specific fact and take us out of reality and put us in something. So, and that's what, it's part of your magic and part of the generosity that comes out of your writing and out of your work. So how did it, so we spoke about your work as an author. let's start. I know that you are prioritizing author first, but let's look at the publishing, because of course you are quite a significant publishing house as well. And I'll repeat again, the leadershipbooks.com, and of course all the books. So you guys have a lot of books. There's a lot of authors involved. As we're talking about some of the biggest authors in the world. There's a lot of personalities, some of more famous than others. But tell us a bit about, first of all, creating the publishing house, running the publishing house, and as well taking this, because you have a really lot of fantastic things here.
So in 2013, when I wrote Journey to Generosity, I had a traditional book publisher. I had a traditional book publisher for many of my books, and it wasn't going anywhere. Now, this is that book that I mentioned. I got a consultant, and Art Ritter came alongside of me and helped me write. So I had a lot poured into this book. I really wanted big things to happen with this book, and nothing was happening with this book, and it was very frustrating. And so I went to my book publisher, and they said, yeah, well, it's just the audience doesn't like it. It's not achieving anything. And I'm like, but this book is really important to me, because it was part of how I got speaking engagements and consulting engagements. This book was a key part of my marketing. So I've been an entrepreneur all of my life. I've done all kinds of different things, from agriculture to tourism to all kinds of different things. And so I decided, well, if he's not going to believe in my book and he's not going to sell my book, I'm going to get my book back, and I'm going to figure something else out. So I wrestled my book back from my book publisher. I actually had to pay them to give me my book back. They made more money off of me paying them to get my book back than they did selling the book. And then I sat down with my coach, and we did a deep dive into the publishing world, trying to figure out why books sell, who buys books, and where do they buy them. Those are the first questions I had to ask, because I, like so many authors, even today, didn't understand how book publishing works. Most authors, even today, think I write a great manuscript, I throw it over the fence to my publisher, and my publisher throws back bags of money. That's what they think. That's not how it works at all. It probably never worked this way, but if it did, that was 50 years ago. Today, it's a whole nother approach. So first we had to figure out where they were buying books. Are they buying books? And what books are they buying? What are the key pieces? So as we dug into that, we first just self-published Journey to Generosity and started a marketing campaign around that with that data that we learned, and the book really did well. So from that point, we applied that same technique to my other books, and they started to do well. And then we realized, okay, so maybe we got something here. So then we started to bring in other people's books and try it with them, and they did well. And then we kept increasing that until what we now call Leadership Books has got a team of people who work in this particular philosophy, and that we stay very nimble with the constant changing tide of both what the consumer wants and what the publishing industry thinks it has. So for an example, people do not buy books at bookstores anymore. You might wish they did. You might romantically look at the old days when you could go in a bookstore and sit down, look at a book. But the facts are that the consumer has decided they're going to buy books online. That's where they've decided to buy them. You can be upset about that, but that isn't going to help you as an author. You better go where they're going to buy books. That's the first part. Secondly, they're going to buy books because someone told them to buy that book. All right. And that's really key to understand. Someone said to them, this was a great book, you should get it. And if you're a reader, you'll go look for it, get it, and then read it. Those are the first two elements to understand about book publishing. Is people, one, are going to buy books online, and two, they're going to only go there if somebody told them to do it. And so with that very basic principle, that's how we do our marketing. That's how we do our public relations. That's how we do everything, is really connecting with people where they buy their books. And then we just use the modern techniques of retargeting and marketing and all of those kinds of things which ironically, the big book publishers still haven't figured out. I imagine they eventually will, but they haven't figured it out yet, really how to do that well. They're still trying to sell to bookstores. I listened to a publisher the other day talking about his dad started the business, and originally they had 40 salespeople, and now they have 4. Why? Because they're still trying to sell to bookstores, and the bookstores are closing. It's kind of like where Blockbuster Video is when Netflix came along. They had all this investment in retail stores, and Netflix came along and started mailing discs to people to allow people to watch their movies on a disc in their home and then mail them back. And that changed the industry, and the industry's changed. And if you don't wake up to that, you'll never understand it. So I got into book publishing at first just to get my own books going. And now we've multiplied that. And as you mentioned, we have about 2,200 books on our site right now, a little bit more than that, but roughly 2,200 books on there. And we keep growing.
Well, there's a lot of wonderful information. I think you read completely about this narrative and the way you approach both the way to position authors, position book publishers, and how you take it forward, which is not a simple task. And effectively, there's a lot of books, especially I'm particularly interested in the business books, but you have a lot of different things here, featured authors, and some of them quite impressive bestsellers. So in terms of coming back to your experience, how do you manage your work as an author and dealing with other authors? Because that's another important thing, because you as an author, you have a specific needs, and each author, and some of them have specific egos as well. So there's a lot of nuances that you have to deal, and insecurities and different areas that I would like to hear your opinion.
Great, boy, nobody's asked this, but it's very big reality in our lives. First off, one of the things that we do with my books is every time our team comes up with some new or interesting test or idea that we want to do to sell books, we try them with my books first. That way, if it doesn't work, the author doesn't get mad or we didn't mess something up. Okay. If it goes bad for some reason, the only one I can yell at is me, and I'm okay with that. So we do a lot of testing with my books, and which also includes a lot of failures with some of the things that we do. That's the first piece. The other is I uniquely write outside of the nonfiction world now. So my evolution as an author has started out with writing more traditional kind of business books, and then more of the storytelling kind of books that I mentioned. And then I recently moved over. My last book was a fiction book, kind of a Tom Clancy book about modern politics and fun adventures that people have. Maybe not so fun, but it's kind of a gritty book. And I wanted to write it because I wanted to try to do something more than what I'd been doing before. And I came to the realization that at least for me, some authors may not agree, but at least for me, I think I had to write nonfiction books before I could write a fiction book. And a fiction book, it's because a fiction book is wholly created in your head. Okay. A nonfiction book, it's usually based around experiences or other people's experiences or something like that. But a fiction book is completely created. And I'll give you a fun example is I couldn't remember my main characters' names as I wrote the book. Why? Because I didn't know these people. They weren't real. You know, I will always remember your name because I've associated this time with you, but I couldn't remember their name because I created it. So I had to actually create biographies on every one of my characters so I could go back to them and remember what I said in the book about them in order to continue the consistency of that. And so I'm saying that to say I'm now primarily writing in fiction, and so it doesn't conflict much at all with the other authors that we sell in leadership books. But it's still, the principles are all the same. That's the key thing. And I've actually been able to inspire some of my nonfiction writers to begin to write some fiction, very similar, as I mentioned, to Patrick Lencioni's book, where they're using business stories but they're creating fiction work about that to express their stories. And I don't think I would have been able to do that if I didn't get inspired myself to write fiction.
It's
I hope that
really
helps.
no, it's amazing, and I appreciate as well the straight you go to the point, like sharp. No, fantastic. So from an author, I think with your achievements and as well with I love that you keep testing and of course pushing the boundaries and from leadership to fiction. Um, and is there anything you want to share with us, especially in terms of techniques of writing? And I know that you say you're quite slow, but I'm sure that you have some mechanics to make it faster because you write a lot. So, but any things you want to showcase with us, of course, because I think these details, the devil is all the details, and like
Yeah.
Cicero said, is nulla die sine linea, not one single day without a line. At least I try to do that, even in small things. So for people listening to us, and I'm sure that I think everyone I speak wants to be an aspiring author. At least if you are a
Yes.
business leader, there's somehow inside of you that. So how do you deal with that? And as well, how you keep that experimental and as well pushing the boundaries of you as an author and as a publisher and as someone that is really very, very immersive in your art?
So as a publisher, it's funny, I'll go and speak about book publishing and I'll have others come. Some are competitors, some are book agents and stuff like that. Now they'll say, yeah, you can't do that. That's not how it's done. And I generally laugh and I quote back a line that a very famous preacher from England said back in the day. His name was Charles Spurgeon. He said, well, I like the way we're doing it better than the way you're not doing it. And I really believe that we have to try new things and test new things. We have to see if different ways will work and make your audience and make a connection in that. And so you got to be open to that. Now, when it comes to writing, one of the things that people told me is you can't use a story arc in a nonfiction book. They've told me that many times. That doesn't work. Now, for your listeners, if you don't know what a story arc, or you don't think you know what a story arc is, I'll explain it real quickly. Every time you watch a movie, okay, the movie goes something like this. The first 10 minutes go along and you get to know the character and you get to find out who they are and you see them in normal life. And then all of a sudden something happens. They get cancer, they get married, there's a car accident, something happens. And then the story builds, okay, with adventure after adventure to a peak, the peak of the arc. And then down the backside of that arc is what I like to call redemption, where it all comes together. At that arc, it's the most impossible moment. Now, the story arc idea has been happening. I mean, Plato used it, Shakespeare used it. This isn't a new idea, okay? But those of us we are pre-programmed into following a story arc. When we watch movies, we're pre-programmed into following a story arc. We've been doing this since we could hold a book or look at a screen. We've been seeing story arcs. And so we're used to seeing it happen this way. This is how we want stories to be told to us. So in the same way, you can apply that, your nonfiction work, into a story arc, and you're going to have a much better book. Most of us want to write a fiction book from the beginning to the end. In the beginning, God created, and then I was in second grade, and then I was in fifth grade, and then I was in 12th grade, and then I graduated college, and I met my wife, and then, that's horrible. Don't do that. Okay, don't do that. Start out with, hey, this was an incredible moment in my life, first 2 chapters, and then build on how you got there. The reader will follow it. You don't have to start. You don't have to do it in a timeline. The reader will follow it and tell it every chapter be engaging, and then apply things that you see in movies, and things like hooks and cliffhangers and all of those pieces that are just normal storytelling that you would put into it, and you'll end up having a great book. When it comes to writing, when it comes to publishing, you got to find a publisher that's on the edge of what you do and what you're trying to publish, and somebody that will take some chances and put some effort in. Most publishers today, the first question they'll ask a nonfiction author is, well, how many followers do you have on Twitter? How many followers do you have on Facebook? When you speak, how much do you charge? Because what they want is they want you to have a big platform, all right, so that they can have you sell the book. Well, at last I knew, this is where I stick to the old thinking. The publisher is supposed to sell the book. All right. So let's get a publisher that's going to promote you and advance your overall career. Okay. If you have 1.5 million listeners to your podcast, your publisher should be able to contribute 300,000 more to that, not the other way around. Okay. That's how this is supposed to work. And so find a publisher that does that, and they're hard to find.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think you're right. And I think at the moment, so let me ask you, and I know that we are conscious of your time. So you mentioned the digital part and both where you find your audience, where you engage with your audience, and how the publishing network and the author works together. And what I love is that you are talking about the arc. Well, a lot of arcs, but in this case is the arc in terms of author, publisher, and then the digital infrastructure. Because at the moment, if digital infrastructure, and at the moment we are in a very specific area because you have the extreme right, the extreme left, you have the middle time, you have the different parts, and there's a lot of tribes, which is not different, but probably we are in the very more divisive parts somewhere. So how do you deal, especially with the digital component of it? Because it's a very difficult part right now for especially for younger generation authors coming to this world. And of course, we very easily can be lost in translation, literally with all the digital, and especially right now with I'm putting this is a big question, but as well putting as well things like ChatGPT in the middle. This becomes much more complex because at the moment we're dealing with humans, machines, and at the same time all the social media tribes and all different areas. So how do you see this component, especially in your angle between author and as well publisher?
Man, that's a great question. So for the last 2 years, we have been asking that question. The publishing world, what the publishing world all knows is that this year, 30-year-old people, men and women, do not read. They can read, they don't read. Next year, they're going to be 31. Soon they'll be 35. Not long from now, they'll be 50, and we'll all be out of business. So what do we do? Well, most of the publishing world just says, well, they're going to grow out of it. Yeah, no, I'm not going to risk my career that way. First off. Secondly, that's not, in my life experience, that's not true. I have 3 grandchildren. They're all passionate readers. Why are they passionate readers? Because their parents trained them to read and put that passion in them. So if you're 30 years old and you don't have the passion to read, you're most likely not going to decide to read at 50. So where are they getting their long formatted information? Well, the studies are pretty positive about this. They get their long form information from YouTube. They go to YouTube. If they want to fix their car, they go to YouTube. If they want to know about something, they go to YouTube, and they find a instruction there. They're looking for long form information there. When I say long form, anything that's more than a blog post. Okay. All right. Everything under that, a tweet, a Facebook post, a video, whatever, but something that's going to go 20 minutes long and teach them about something, that's where they go. And they're now moving over to online courses. Okay. So what we're doing is we've set out this year, 2023, is to move all of our books into online courses as well. We bought the URL, leadershipcourses.com, and we're building out courses to go with these books. So now you have a course that's each, if let's say hypothetically you got 10 chapters in your book, you go each episode of the course is on each chapter. They go 10 to 20 minutes long, and then you do an intro and an exit. So if you have 10 chapters, you've got a course of 12 episodes, and they correspond with the book. And then you write a discussion guide or a study guide to go along with it. And now you have a package. You have a book, a course, a discussion guide. I call it course light, by the way. It's not a course like going to college or you're trying to get a certification. It's just to go along with the book. And now the author's on there speaking about the book, talking about their book, telling backstory about the book, how they came up with it, and then of course the content of the book. And I believe that in another 15 to 20 years, there'll be more courses than books out there. Now, I'll make one caveat. The AI guys all say, oh no, it's going to all be, we're going to go into an artificial world. Well, maybe, but it's not ready yet. I don't understand how it works. And then there's part of me that just gives me creepy feelings. And so I don't know. And if you think ebooks are the answer, just look at the stats. Ebooks are not the answer. Ebooks have plateaued. They don't really grow much. Amazon made a big bet on ebooks, and I think they won in the short term, but they're not going to win in the long term. By far, 82% roughly now of the buyers of books still buy paperback and hardcover books. You can't argue against that. Okay. But what's growing is audiobooks, and what's growing are courses. So let's see if we can do something with that statistic and still be able to provide long form information to them. I don't know. We'll see. I could be wrong, but we're putting the effort in for it.
No, I'm with you, and it's interesting because I have some actually a follow-up question that touches this. It's one of the things I always like to look at stats, like you just mentioned. So, according to a study by Google Books, there have been 129 million books published since the invention of Gutenberg's press on 1440. And the average US book now sells less than 200 copies per year and less than 1,000 copies over its lifetime. But of course, this study doesn't include the self-published books titles. And the very important thing is that digital publishing has risen 246% since 2010. So in the end of the day, it might be that people don't read, but in the end of the day, if you look at history, not everyone read. Okay, at the end of the day, if you look at history, just go back to the 19th century or so, very small people even knew how to read. So I think we have a perception, probably there's a perception of course, if you are in a device, you are actually reading. You might not read a book, and you have different things. So I think that the immersive part of reading and all these things, that even podcasts in the end of the day, or audiobooks. For instance, I'm a huge fan of audiobooks because you actually can engage and listen doing multitasking, and they actually end up so I think at the moment we have a kind of a medium change in the concept of the book. But in the end of the day, I think it's about storytellers like you and authors that are really passionate about this that makes the difference. But I want to come back to the passion and to how you see these numbers, because of course you can go for stats for a long time, and of course you are an industry expert in terms of both as an author, as a publisher. But I'm interested in the author a bit more, and I know that is your passion as well. So, and being respectful of your time. So, in terms of this passion for books, okay, the end of the day, let's look at, I always like to look at personal performance and how you deal with these things. And you touch a couple of very wonderful pearls during the podcast, but from the writing process to the publishing process, what is the part that you are more passionate about that you want to share with us? Some episode, you mentioned the episode on the ski resort, but as well, I would like to probably in the second part of the question, how you deal, especially with the, let's say, I have published as well a lot of books myself and write a lot of books, and I get very lost in my books. So how do you do with that? You are creating as well your own kind of metaverse, let's put it that way. If you use a new term, how do you deal as well with that heritage? I want to touch that part.
You hit on something. So when I write, I split my time. I go down to Mexico pretty often and sit and write. Either out of the mountains, both of my wives make comments about the fact that I'll get up at 6 in the morning when I'm writing. I'll get up at 6 in the morning and I start to write, and I'll write for 5 hours straight. I can't do much more than 5 hours, and then the rest of the day, I'm in the zone. And I'm going to steal your idea. I'm in the metaverse of the story. Okay, I've never heard that, but I'm going to steal it because I like it. I'm in the metaverse of the story. I'm thinking about the characters. I'm visioning the next part of the plot. I'm trying to think through twists, and that might go on for 5, 10, 6 more hours. Okay, that's all I'm thinking about. And so for me, this isn't everybody, but for me, when I'm writing, I need a place to where I don't have a whole bunch of other responsibility for that other 5 or 6 hours, because my mind is going around the whole story. I develop, and I suggest this to everybody, I develop the overall plan, the story arc, that what we're going to do. I do that with my editor, and then I write my chapters to that plan. My chapters are in around 3 to 4,500 words. That's a good number for the reader because they pretty much want to break off at around that point. And I keep it on that subject, and then I really kind of try to work on that chapter and make it as powerful as I possibly can as a storyteller. And then I turn that chapter in, and I start to work on the next chapter. In the meanwhile, my editor is over here working on it, and then he sends it back to me while I'm still over here working on this. And then we do this kind of leapfrog thing, and we just keep going and going and going until the book comes to the point of it has a manuscript. That's all it is. It's not a book. It's just a manuscript. And then it goes through a whole bunch of other stages. But for writing, that's how I do it. Now, I'm a pantser. Okay, what does that mean? Some people plan their book to the T. They're planners. Other people are pantsers. They write by the seat of their pants. So I write by the seat of my pants. I like to do that. I feel much more creative that way than feeling like I'm structured to something. So when I first organized my book, I use a mind map, okay? And I write out my chapters on the mind map, and I write out a biography, and then I can use my fingers to move the chapters around if I want to. And then pretty soon as I get writing, the more I get writing, the less I refer to my mind map because I now know where I'm going. And then I just go for it. And for me, that works great. Now, there's all kinds of people that say different things and give different ideas and all of that. And I think it's all great. None of it's wrong. Well, some of it might be wrong, but this is how I go about it. I try to keep it simple for writers. Be passionate. And then my last point I would say to a writer is dump your gut on the keyboard. Do not hold back. I want to see your snark. I want to see your embarrassment. I want to see your fun. I want to see your laughter. I want to see your intimacy. I want to see your humility. I want to see your vulnerability. I want to see your failure. I want to see everything. Don't hold back. I'll make a point with this. In my book, Life Without Reservation, at church, one of the women in church had a copy of the book, and she come up to me after church and she poked me in the chest. She said, "You're stupid." And I'm like, okay, well, why are you saying that? She goes, "Because I read chapter 7 of your book, and you tell that story about you getting pulled over and over again by the police. You're stupid. Don't you learn?" And I laughed and I said, "You know what? Just keep reading. You'll see my point." She hadn't finished the chapter, and it comes to a very unique point. And it's actually a made up story, but she didn't know that. I wrote it in such a way that it feels like it's real. And what I got out of that, most importantly, is I engaged her. She was engaged enough to walk up to me and tell me I was stupid. And that is the goal. That's the goal, is for people to tell you you're stupid, or you're funny, or you're sad, or you cry, you made me cry, or whatever. That's the goal for good writing.
No, I think it's really wonderful, these precious pearls of wisdom. I know that we passed 1 hour and I want to be respectful of your time. So one last question. So from all the books you wrote so far, what would be the one that you would like for people that don't know your work? What would be the one that you would highlight? And if you can just contextualize shortly.
For every author, it's the last book that they wrote is the best book, for two reasons. One, the first book every book you memorialize what you know on the subject matter and as the ability to write. When you finish a book, you memorialize what you know at that moment. And if you're a growing human being, a healthy human being, you should be growing every day after you finish that book. So the last book's always the best book. And that my last book was Ghost Patriot. I would encourage everybody to buy it. You can get it at ghostpatriotbook.com and read it. I warn you, it's a fiction book. It's an adventure book. It's some people are just not going to like it. If you're into 20th century romance novels, you're not going to like this book. Okay, so save yourself some time. If you want to know about who I am as a human being, my view of Christianity, my view of generosity, my view of how the Bible, Jesus Christ informs my life, my book, Life Without Reservations, is definitely it. that book is my heart. That's the book I poured my heart in about myself and how I see the world, how I believe the world works. And so I would encourage you there as well.
Fantastic. So we will highlight all of this. There's much more questions I have. Probably we'll do a part 2. Really an honor to have you here. Very inspiring. I think we will list the books, and especially the last one, we'll put a bit of more information. It's been an honor, Michael. I wish you all the luck for continuing to write much more books and much more inspiration, and I will continue reading them as well. I didn't read this, but I'll push them to my books ABC series, which is a separate part where actually I do my summary of the books I like. Thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you here.
All right. God bless. I appreciate you very much. This was fun.
Thank you so much.